Hello, my friends. It's very good to be back with you again. In fact, it's very good to be doing anything again. You may have noticed that there's been quite a pause from my last video when I recorded the introductory part to the Brahmaviharas, and the simple reason is I've been sort of out of action with a nasty viral infection on my chest. I may still hear my voice a little bit, but hopefully I will be coherent enough to get this message across to you today. But it's great to be back, and I am excited to get back on track with this particular course that we're on, looking at the wonderful Brahmaviharas, the dwelling places of the divine attributes that we can all have for ourselves, that we can all develop through our lives. And I went through the introduction. I mentioned the different aspects and what the different Brahmaviharas are. And this one today, we will be looking at what's known as Metta, or Maitri in Sanskrit, Metta in Pali. And it is a type of meditation that is particularly known in the Buddhist tradition, although it did originate in the yogic practices many thousands of years ago. There was mention of it in the ancient Indian scriptures, but it's something that certainly has been very well developed by the Buddhist traditions, by Buddha himself, who's known as the Supreme Buddha, the original Buddha, if you like. Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, and also successive Buddhas as well, sort of added to this practice, and it is a practice. You'll see what I mean as we go through. Now, it's a particularly powerful and poignant form of meditation when we go into what's known as loving kindness meditation, which is what this actually means. And I've sort of been out of action myself and been sort of rather ill and sort of in bed, if you like. I've been kind of catching up on a lot of the world news and things that are going around at the moment. And one thing that you won't notice an awful lot of in the news, you probably never do really, is love, kindness, understanding, unity, and basically, just the kind of care that we should have, that the divine wants us to have for one another. It's been quite alarming to see some of the things that are happening in the world. I don't ever intend to ever talk about politics. That's not my intention. But when I see terrible intolerance towards certain people, certain groups in the community, and towards anybody really, whether it's towards people or animals for that matter, then something sort of stirs within me, and I am, it gets to me. It gets to me. In the ways that it gets to all of us really, whether that be, feelings of unbelief, whether it's feelings of anger, or whether it's feelings of great sadness, which I've got to say is the kind of the overarching sort of emotion that I felt a lot seeing some of the news reports about, how people just don't seem very tolerant of anybody who they perceive to be sort of different in any way. And looking at the world, we've got a thing going around the outside of the world called the equator, haven't we? And we can't see it, but it's just an imaginary line that goes around the outside of the world. And in the same way, all the land mass in the world you won't really see any physical borders or boundaries between nations, between one country and another. But in our infinite wisdom as mankind, we've liked to carve up this land to various different little places and put our imaginary lines on there. Nobody, in my knowledge, has ever fought over the equator as to which side of the equator they're on. Oh, you southern hemisphere people, you're not as good as us northern hemisphere people. Get back down there where you belong. But unfortunately, that kind of mentality, that kind of attitude, does pervade the world, and we see a lot of things coming up through nationalism and just general intolerance that are very interesting, shall I say. But what the ancient scriptures of India, of every probably culture, every spiritual culture, every spiritual tradition, whether it's the Ayurveda, the Bhagavad Gita, or whether it's the teachings of Buddha, whether it's in the Bible, whether it I'll caveat the Bible, I'll say whether it's the words of Jesus Christ, who was very much a peacemaker and very much somebody that wants to unite everybody and not make separations, at a time in the nation where he lived and grew up, lived for part of his life. We know that he was outside of the place where he grew up for a great big chunk of his life. Probably half of his life he was travelling in the East, which has been documented. Egypt, possibly India, Nepal, different places like that. I'm not making this up. If you research it, you will find that he's mentioned in many different traditions. But he was somebody that tried to bring peace, and he tried to unite people from different cultures and different areas where he lived, and that didn't go down very well. Didn't go down very well with the ruling powers in Judea, whether they were the Romans or whether they were the Jewish community, because everybody, very much like today, had got an axe to grind with somebody else, and anybody that came speaking a message that was outside what the prescribed message was that was supposed to be put out there. We've got a modern word for it. We call it propaganda. It's basically putting out your side of a message and making that to the point where you can't go against that, you can't speak out against that. Jesus, very much like many other leaders in different traditions throughout the globe, was a peacemaker and was somebody that tried to bring people together. So, what I'm saying is this, that as a world today, we need peacemakers. We need people that don't see the differences between people, the differences between cultures, the differences between nations. We need to see that we're all created in the divine image, and we all have the potential. In fact, we all do carry that divine spark inside us. The yogic tradition calls it Brahman, and Brahman dwells inside the human heart. Brahman is actually seated. It tells us in the Upanishads that Brahman is like, imagine almost like the self, which is seated in the human heart, in that lotus blossom that is inside the heart. The very attributes of God are there on the inside. But I digress. Let's get back to the Brahmaviharas and let's get back to what metta meditation is all about. Well, metta meditation is all about actually giving this loving kindness to others. It's actually about wishing the best for everybody. Now, it's quite obvious that you're finding sort of so many of these traditions, but it's quite obvious also in our modern culture that we're starting to have an understanding of the fact that without self-love, without self-respect, without self-love, without being kind and compassionate and generous to ourselves, it is impossible to really show these things to others. It's impossible to be able to sort of express these to others and to practice them to other people. We need to look, first of all, at what our relationship with it is with ourselves. And many of us, depending on your mindset and your personality, but there is a great trend today, in today's world, for us to have a self-loathing, a self-hatred, a self-deprecation, a putting of oneself down, a feeling that we are not good enough, feeling guilty, feeling ashamed, etc., etc. We don't generally esteem ourselves very highly. And this is a problem, because then when we try to have compassion and kindness to ourselves, we have 100 reasons why we don't think we deserve that compassion or kindness towards ourselves. But I'm here to tell you that we don't need to beat ourselves up. The divine does not see us as some kind of wretched being that needs to be somehow dragged out of this maya. I'm not saying that any of us are perfect. And of course, if we use our own judgment and we look at other people and look at ourselves, we can always see shortcomings and we can always see things that we think are imperfect. But to get to the heart of metta, we have to, as I said in a previous video, we have to look at this fact of equanimity, this principle of equanimity. We have to look at unity consciousness. We have to look at the fact that we are all basically one. There's not really any distinction between us. We are all the divine. The divine is within us, having an experience of this mortal human life. Now, you may or may not be able to look at yourself and think, yeah, I can see that God's on the inside and God's looking out. The divine is looking out through my eyes and having this experience, if you like. But sometimes it's hard to imagine that of somebody that we really dislike, shall we say, or really disapprove of, or somebody that's really hurt us, or somebody that we perhaps hate. But all of these things are things that, in order for us to get back to this divine nature that is within us, to get to the heart of the divine nature, the true self that's within us, we need to cultivate these virtues, these divine properties, which are the Brahmaviharas. So let's have a look at metta in a little bit more depth. So the heart of metta, if you like, is this meditation, which became the tradition in the Buddhist practice. And it's about wishing well, wishing the best on first of all on ourselves. Then it moves on to people who are So from ourselves, first of all, yourself, to those who are closest to us. So in the kind of the Buddhist teaching, you kind of looking at somebody who's like a great teacher, a great mentor, maybe a master of teaching, that those sort of things like that, who one is sort of grateful to. But to be honest, for our intents and purposes, it's just whoever is closest to you, whoever is that person that you are close to and you are grateful to for what they've done for you in your life. Excuse me. I'm not going to say it's got to be in a spiritual sense necessarily, because we don't all have that background of a spiritual background. A lot of us are coming from a secular background, but we still appreciate the kindness, the love, the generosity and the care that those who are close to us give us. So it's quite easy to progress from yourself to those who are closest to you. And the next stage after that would be those that we meet on a sort of a, on a fairly regular basis. It might be somebody who's our neighbour that we see, maybe exchange a word or two with, maybe somebody that we work with, maybe, a general bunch of people that we see like that. We don't have any particularly strong natural feelings towards them. We don't consider them to be family. We don't consider them to be friends. We don't consider them to be particularly close to us. But we certainly wouldn't wish any harm on them, should we say. They're just acquaintances that we meet. And yeah, if we heard that somebody was very ill or had died or something like that, well, we hopefully, if we're empathetic people, we'd have a little bit of empathy towards them, and we think, oh, that's sad, Mr. Johnson that lives at number 48, passed away last week. That's sad. He's somebody that I've had a chat with occasionally. But you get the idea. So the next group of people, so we're going outwards. If you imagine, it's almost like an onion, so you've got yourself at the centre, then you've got the person that's sort of closest to you, then you've got, you could interpose another layer of that, maybe your family, your close friends, something like that as well. That's a possibility to add into this sequence. But I'm just giving you the sort of the basic lowdown of what this practice, generally from the traditional sense, how it kind of unfolds. So after this, we also look then at difficult people. Now, it could be your mortal enemy, but that's a bit difficult to start with. So generally in this practice, it's somebody that is a challenge to us, shall we say, somebody that's difficult to get on with for one reason or another. Maybe somebody that's hurt us in the past. Maybe it's somebody that we don't trust for one reason or another. Maybe it's somebody that just rubs us up the wrong way. Maybe it's somebody that we really, would want to make ourselves scarce if that person was around, should we say. I'm not saying it's somebody that you necessarily want to kind of, have fisticuffs with and punch them on the nose or worse. But ideally, we want to get to a place where we can show loving kindness to everybody, even those who are the ones who deeply hurt us. But starting at this point, the traditional way, we look at the ones who are difficult, the ones who are a bit of a challenge. And after that, we sort of round it up by looking at showing this loving kindness, unconditional love, as I could describe it to you, using a term that's more often used in Christianity. The word in the Greek New Testament is agape, which means a sort of a godlike love, which is kind of beyond the human level, if you like, a type of love which is unconditional. So all of these things, as I said, it's a bit like an onion. You've got different layers, and you start at the centre and you work outwards. If you can imagine sort of ever increasing circles. So we go from self, those closest, those who are kind of not so close, those who are more difficult. And then often we find it's commonly used that we kind of look at the geographical areas going out. Now, the earliest Buddhist traditions actually had this image of this person who, you've seen those sort of conch shells that they use in the Pacific, where they will sort of use them as like a horn, and they'll blow to kind of, you know, summon the tribe or the elders, or, you know, just to make an announcement. Or you may have seen, like in the Jewish tradition, they have the shofar, which is the ram's horn, which they blow on special occasions as well. Well, the earliest traditions kind of had this idea of this kind of this person standing and blowing like this, and the directions to which they would go would be sort of north, south, east and west. So they go to the different points. They may even go to the, you know, northwest, northeast, southwest, southeast, etc. As well. But they would be looking out in the different directions. This is the earliest tradition, and it's the idea of cultivating the love inside your own heart, which they would do by sort of practicing various different virtues. They would get into meditation, obviously. They would still the mind, and there would be a certain amount of activation of the chakra system, moving up to the higher chakras, as we've seen in our teachings of that as well. But at this point, it's about sort of broadcasting that out to others. So it's very hard for us as humans to kind of think, okay, I'm going to send my love and kindness out everywhere. But if so, probably the tradition grew up because it was easiest for us to look at sort of going this way, this way and that way, and kind of, you know, sending it out, as it were. The later traditions developed the idea of who were the types of people, if you like, that we wanted to send it out to. So when we want to send out this loving kindness to all other beings, and it's not just human beings, you know, it's the whole world, it's all the animals, it's all the plants, it's the whole life that we see around us, well-being, the loving kindness, the metta that we want to show is towards all beings. So after we've gone through this list of kind of people that we kind of visualize, then probably what is usually done at this next point is that we look out. So we look to, say, our local area. So I might say, you know, may all beings in the Telford and Wrekin area be happy. May they be free from suffering. May they be healthy. May they be at peace. May they live with ease. This kind of thing. These are the sort of wishes that we wish. But we start at ourselves for a good reason. As I said, if we don't start on ourselves, if we don't love ourselves, then what have we got to share? If your candle's not lit, then you don't have any light to share with anyone else, do you? Once your candle's lit and you have that flame burning on the inside, bearing in mind that we realise that we're not wonderful people who are like, you know, superior or better than anybody else. It's not an ego thing at all. This is about recognising the true self that's inside, the Brahman, recognising that the divine dwells inside us, and because the divine dwells inside us, that gives us value, that gives us worth. We are valuable. We're valuable in our own right. We're valuable to the divine because the divine wouldn't be inside us were we not valuable. And we're valuable to others as well because we as a species need one another. We are a sociable species that needs others, that needs to be in tribes, that needs to be in groups, that needs company, generally. So we start with ourselves, and it's not about sitting there and thinking, I've got this issue and that issue and this problem and that problem. It's about remembering the good, remembering that good sensation, and really just wanting to desire for ourselves that we have the best, that we have good things coming towards us. Once we've got through this first level, it's about growing that love on the inside of our hearts. It's about that love expanding. And in our talks about the chakras, we see the fact that these energies, Shiva's energy, Shakti's energy, coming through the body and converging at this point of the Anahata chakra. This is the place where the life force energy actually flows out from us to the world, and we looked at our hands and our arms as extensions of the heart, because that's how we actually share that love outwards. So this very much ties in with the ancient yogic traditions, even though the Buddhist traditions have got their own sort of take on it, if you like. So I wanted to look also at the hindrances, the things that could stop us from loving. So while we were talking about ourselves, first of all, fear of being hurt. And we hurt ourselves all the time, yes. Anger and resentment. I think it speaks for itself. And then ego and control and pride. I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to do that, because that's, I'm not lowering myself to that level to do this. And then, of course, scepticism that any of this is going to work. So when we've worked on ourselves, we then can go out to those who are close to us, and we can wish this good feeling, these good energies that we've developed inside us, these good wishes, we can move those out to the next circle, if you like, the next layer of the onion, to those who are closest to us. And when we've fostered that, when we've grown that love, that loving kindness, to the level that we've shown that to them, the unconditional love to them around us, we can then move out to others who we may be just acquaintances, and then others who we find difficult. That might be a bit of a jump, but this is a necessary process that we need to work on in order for ourselves to reach the point of enlightenment, because this is all part of our path towards enlightenment, our spiritual journey. And of course then it extends out to everyone and every being and every creature in the creation. We could even extend it, and I do in my own practice. I'll extend it and I'll say every being, everywhere. We looked at we looked at this particular mantra last time, and we looked at the fact that in repeating this ancient Sanskrit mantra, we're saying that all beings, loka, everywhere, samasta, everywhere, not exclusively just even necessarily on planet Earth, necessarily in this dimension, wherever, but all beings everywhere. We're wishing that they would be Sukhina, happy, and Bhavantu, free. And we looked at how that was a great mantra to chant. And indeed, there's a video where I actually go through that, if you want to have a look and catch up on that. So what I'll basically do is I'll just share with you sort of the way I do this myself as my example. This is by no means the way you've got to do it, because this needs to work for you. And we need to start on ourselves first of all. So I would begin with saying something along the lines of this. May I be happy. May I be healthy. May I be free from pain and suffering. May I live in peace, and may I live with ease. These are quite traditional statements, if you like, traditional affirmations that are often made in sort of the Buddhist tradition, but they're very good ones to have. And as we say it, it's not a matter of sort of, it's not a magic spell, should we say. It's not something that like, it's, confessing it and so it shall be so. It's actually, we're saying it, but we are convincing ourselves in our hearts of this. We wanting to feel this. It's not about understanding it necessarily in the mind. It's not necessarily trying to kind of beat ourselves around the head. Look, you've got to be happy. You're going to be happy. You're going to be happy. I'm not saying that. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, my wish for myself is that I may be happy. My wish for myself is that I may be healthy. My wish for myself is that I may be free from pain and suffering. And my wish for myself is that I may be at peace, and that I may live with ease, which means generally a nice, pleasant, sort of comfortable life. Who of us wouldn't like that for ourselves? I'm sure nobody would say, oh, I don't want that kind of life. No, I don't want that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there are people who'd say, no, I don't really want to enjoy myself at all. I don't deserve it, and no. I like to really struggle through life. But let's face it, most of us, we don't. Most of us want to have a nice, comfortable, easy life. So it's not too much of a stretch to want to wish ourselves these things. When we've grown that in our heart, when we've realised, when we've actually felt that love actually growing, when we can actually shut our eyes and we can actually feel, yeah, may I be happy. I really want that happiness. I really want to be happy. I really want that peace for myself. I really don't want to suffer. We are wishing ourselves kindness. So as we go out through these layers of the onion, as I described it, it's not so much of a jump to go to the next person, that person that is close to us, that we love, that we're grateful to. Whoever that may be in your life. For some people, daft as it might seem to some of you, but others will know what I'm saying, it might even be a pet. The number of people that I've known that have said to me, oh, I'd rather have my dog than anybody else. They understand me better than anybody else. Or my cat, oh, she really kind of seems to get me, and other people don't. It's whoever this being is that you're grateful to. And I'm not saying that every time you make this affirmation, it's necessarily got to be the same person. It's about making the journey outwards, taking the love, the compassion, that unconditional love out to others. The next step, where it's those that are in our sort of orbit, but we're not really particularly have a close relationship to them in any way. They're just on our periphery. When it comes to them, it's a little bit more of a stretch than that person that's close to you, isn't it? But it's the next step, the next rung of the ladder. to us realising how we can be a thoroughly kind, generous, loving being who is absolutely showing the attributes of the divine in our lives. And then of course when we come to difficult people, that's even more of a step up, because naturally in our hearts we probably want to wish them ill. Well, in Buddhism particularly, but in some of the other traditions as well, there's this aspect that we really don't want to foster. We don't want to harbour any ill will towards anyone, and that includes those that we might consider our enemies, those that we might consider to be people that have wronged us and hurt us. We don't want to do that. And as I said in a previous video, you know, I think it's a selfless thing to ask the people that are difficult, the people that we don't get on with, that we want to wish them well. The knock-on effect is that really we will find that it ultimately it helps us, because the more we fight and the more we resist those in our lives that we feel we're wronged by or hurt by, then the more our suffering increases, and we don't want our own suffering to increase. And you might also find, of course, as I said before, that in doing good and wishing well and having a kinder attitude towards these people, when we meet them and we have interactions with them, it comes across that we don't have that animosity towards them. And of course they can sense that as well. An antagonistic person, a person who is maybe mean, spiteful, has a grievance with you, you've had a falling out with in the past, things like that, they're going to pick up on any animosity that's coming from you towards them anyway. But equally, if they sense that you are wishing them the best, that will also have a knock-on effect. And over time, you'll find that they're less troublesome to you. They're less of a problem to you. I'm not going to promise you anything. I'm not going to tell you that the people that you've always hated will suddenly fall at your feet and think you're a wonderful person because you started having good wishes towards them. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is this: for us to do the right thing, for us to wish them well, is a step in the right direction, and it's a step towards making peace. We have a strange idea about peace. We feel that if it's not reciprocated, then it's impossible. We feel that we mustn't be the first one to make the move because fear of being hurt, as I said on here, because we're angry and we're resentful, because of our ego and our pride, which tell us I'm not going to lower myself to that standard, or just through pure skepticism that we think it's not going to work, it's not going to work, that person hates me. The moment I lower my guard down, using a boxing term, as soon as I lower my guard, it's going to be bam on the nose. They're going to attack me. Like I say, this is not something that we do overnight. We work through the list. We work through it, and it's a form of development. It is a very, very powerful weapon in our armoury in the meditation practice. It is a very practical practice, and it is a very powerful practice. And it starts with us, first of all. So I'm glad to be back with you. I hope this made sense today. I hope I didn't go on too long. But I just want to say, I wish all of you that you will all be happy. I wish that every one of you would be healthy, that you'd be free from pain and suffering, that you'd live in peace, and that you'd live with ease. So I hope that made some sense. And until next time, Namaskaram.